Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here coming at you with another review. This time we are rounding out November, we've headed into December. It's been 6 weeks of the 2023-24 NBA season. Teams are really starting to make a move, teams are really starting to have a look, and teams are really basically working out, are we going to be a contender because we can beat top teams? Are we going to be a middle of the road team because we fluctuate in our form? Are we going to make the playoffs because we feed off the bottom feeders? Are we a team that genuinely can't get form or string things together, so we're going to be towards the plane? Or are we a team that just can't get things done, and even in December right now, we're looking at squads that are 20 to 25 games into the season, and they're not going to do much more than where they're at the moment. Of course, for some individuals, they're continuing to mount a case. They're still trying to stake a claim. Others coming out of the woodwork, one of them on the screen here, really fitting into a team that's become the most successful in the league. Others, like the other on the other side of the screen, still trying to fit in, still having their moments, not really doing much, and certainly still being part of trade talks. All of that and more in my Week 6 review of the 2023-24 NBA season. We'll head on over and start with our usual suspects in the East. The Atlanta Hawks, 3 games in the week, they went 1-2. They're 9-10 on the season. Their best performer was Trae Young, 30 points, 2.3 rebounds, 12 assists, 1.7 steals with 3 turnovers a game. Less than 44% from the field, 30% from deep, 79.2 from the free throw line. Reasonably consistent, well, what I'd say a normal week for Trae Young. As I mentioned, 1-2 in the week, lost to the Cavs, 128-105, lost to the Bucks, 132-121, but did defeat the Spurs barely by 2 points. And you have to wonder, can they break this seesaw at 500? Some weeks they're above by a game or two, other weeks they're at 500, another week they dip down. They're not able to get any consistent form, and just with the strength of the East right now, particularly when you look at the fact that your second best team in the East right now is Orlando. They may come back to the pack. You've got other teams such as Milwaukee really leading up, wanting to challenge the Bucks. They are the Bucks, wanting to challenge the Celtics. Someone like the Sixers, who continue to plug away and have arguably the MVP of the league on their team. Atlanta need to get on a bicycle and ride. They're going to have to make a decision here. They're going to have to get some consistency into their lineup. Quinn Snyder's going to have to do something, otherwise he's going to make, like most of the other coaches that Trae Young has had, and find himself on the wasteland. They've got to break above 500, and they've got to do it sooner than later. To the Celtics, 2-1 on the week, 15-5 on the season. One of the 2 best teams in the league. They are the number 1 seed in the East. Jaylen Brown with a really nice week. 26.7 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, some good defensive numbers, reasonably efficient with the basketball as well. 1.7 steals, 1.7 blocks, 3 turnovers with a usage rate and the pace. 51.5 from the field, 31.6 from deep, 60% from the free throw line. Got the wins against the Bulls and Philadelphia. Got it done against Chicago, 124-97, and then against Philadelphia, 125-119. They're going to consistently be posting around that 120 mark offensively. That's what's going to keep them in a lot of games as well. Did go down to the Pacers, 122-112, but again, when going up against one of the best offenses the league has seen, you're going to really struggle to keep pace. But the question is there a more rounded defensive team in the league this year? Jaylen Brown can play defense. Jason Tatum can play defense. Derek White can play defense. Then you mash that sandwich pretty much with the bread of Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. Porzingis is a really dynamic big. Drew Holiday is a really dynamic guard who has that ability to, well, he's starting to show. Probably can guard 1 through 5. Really causing some problems defensively there. I think that's ultimately what will keep them in a high contendership as a team, a high contendership in the East, let alone a chance to run to the NBA Finals. I just think with how rounded they are, Al Horford, plug him into that team as well. You know, this is a side that can really get it done on the defensive end, and ultimately the thing that's going to keep them in it. To Brooklyn, they're above 500 now, 2-1 on the week, with Mikal Bridges having another standout run. Of course, we'll get to him a little bit more in a moment. 28.7 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal on the block on 3.3 turnovers. Effective shooting splits, as we've talked about previously. Defeated the Raptors 115-103. Defeated the Magic 129-101. And did lose out to the Hornets 129-128. So almost a 3-0 week for the Nets. But I think that Mikal Bridges had his statement game against Orlando. 42 points. And when you do look at Bridges, this is a guy who looks like he has extra length when he's playing against a really, really lengthy side in Orlando. just really took them to school, getting scores wherever he wanted to. You don't get 42 points for no reason. A genuine statement game, a real this is my team kind of game, one that we've been waiting for all season from Mikal Bridges, certainly one we were sort of waiting for last season, but of course by the time the trade was completed, had to let the season unfold to see where all the pieces of the puzzle fell. But a real statement game there, and I think that's something that Orlando will sort of be taking a look at and go, okay, if we get a player of Bridges' calibre in the playoffs, this is what he's going to be able to do. Meanwhile, for Bridges, it's a real moment, particularly with Brooklyn, where they go, okay, we've got Dinwiddie, we've got Lonnie Walker, we've got Cam Thomas, we've got guys who can score the basketball, we've also got this guy as our number one option. So I think offensively, they've got something they can really look to build upon there. Charlotte, 6-12 on the season, 1-2 on the week. Their best player was Terry Rozier. 23.7 points, 4 rebounds, 8.3 assists, 1.7 steals on 2.3 turnovers. He is a smaller guard, so I'm still not a massive fan, though, of that 42.6 from the field, but a massive conversion from deep and a nice conversion from the free throw line. The big talk has to be when you look at what they're going to be able to do defensively. Yeah, they got the win against Brooklyn, but they had to put 129 points on the board. When they lost to Minnesota, they conceded 123 to 117. And against New York, I mean, they conceded 115 points and only scored 91. Ultimately, they're going to have to find a way to commit defensively. It's the only thing that's going to be able to keep them in games. It's the only thing that's going to keep them relevant on the season if they're not careful. Because LaMelo Ball's obviously out with an ankle concern. Miles Bridges, we all know the story around that one. And there's not necessarily the great consistency out of Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier to really feel that this team is a threat at any point. 6-12 on the season, you're running at a .33 win pace. No one cares about a team that's winning a third of their games. Now, if you're winning you're winning 2/3 of your games, vastly different. But a team that's going to win 1 in every 3, you know, you might get caught in a bad night. Okay, I think good teams will live with a loss on a bad night. Well, that's the only way at this point Charlotte's going to get wins on the board. To the Bulls, 2-1 on the weeks. They had a bit more of a lift, but again, much like Charlotte, a team that's a third of the way through, not really doing too much. Nice week for them, great, but a team that's not doing too much, and a team that realistically they're going to win 1 in every 3. That might mean that they win 1 and lose 5. That's the kind of run they could be on if they're really not careful. Or win 1, lose 4. Win another. So 4-game losing streaks could certainly be on the cards with Chicago. Kobe White with a really nice week once again, back-to-back player of the week for Chicago in my opinion. 24.3 points, 4.7 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.3 blocks on 3 turnovers. Effective shooting splits, of course. They lost to the Celtics 124-97, absolutely belted there. Lost to Milwaukee 121-13 and lost to the Pelicans 124-118. But you really got to wonder what's going on with this team. I mean, all of a sudden, Levine's out for 4 to 5 weeks. It'll be interesting to see how Chicago continues to perform. Now, if they're going to play really well, DeMar DeRozan's going to be able to fit in, Kobe White's going to be able to step up, then maybe trading Levine is really what you need to do. But is it really exactly what you need to do? I don't think it's ideal that you've got a player like Zach LaVine who's potentially injured, who's going to be able to play himself almost out of a team, almost out of a spot. It's just a matter of working out whether these players are going to be committed, whether they're going to be able to get the job done, whether they're going to be consistent. Can they try and lift? Can they try and push through? Otherwise, yeah, you're going to look to blow it up. I mean, All-Star break is certainly going to be that time. Teams are going to look and go, right, you've got an asset there in DeRozan. He's older, but he brings a veteran experience. Not necessarily a big winning experience, but he brings veteran experience. Vucevic is a guy who's going to be able to plug and play wherever he wants. He's a double-double guy, and I think he's going to be reasonably adaptable in any situation. Levine is the real issue here because this is a guy who's had control offensively of this franchise on and off for the last 5 seasons. Gave it up a little bit with DeRozan. We'll see how it goes. I think Kobe White's going to be their sticking point there. Andre Drummond will be the only peacemaker, ironically, out of all of this. To Cleveland, they were 2-1 on the week as well, and they are above 500 now. Best performer, Donovan Mitchell, had a nice, solid week. A guy who's still sitting there in that all-star contention for me. 27.7 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 0.3 blocks. And I can live with those defensive numbers, especially with the conversion at the free throw line. And on top of that, again, it's more living with the defensive numbers despite the inefficiency there. 3.7 turnovers, 43.8 from the field, 24% from deep. They defeated the Hawks 128-105. They defeated the Pistons 110-101. Did lose to the Blazers though, 103-95, failing to get a ton on the board. And it's a matter of them now really accelerating above 500. This is a team that by the end of December is going to want to be 5 or 6 games above 500 to really set themselves apart from the rest of their competition, because 500 is a borderline 8th seed, and at this point it's going to struggle with a play-in tournament. So if you're Cleveland, you want to get above, you want to get towards that 6. They've got players that can do it. They've got a roster that can do it. They need to do it soon. They can't go on a run all of a sudden of, we're going to go 0-2 or 1-3 on a week or 1-2 on a week, because then you're just battling backwards and forwards and you end up in an Atlanta situation where you're seesawing. So I'd like to see them get truly above 500. Donovan Mitchell capable of helping them there. Same with Strus. Same with Garland. Same with Jarrett Allen. Same with Evan Mobley. There's plenty of options there for Cleveland to be able to do this. It's a matter of executing and getting it done. Continuing on in the East, we get to the worst team potentially that's ever stepped on an NBA floor. 0-3 in the week, 2-18 on the season. The Pistons absolutely suck. I'm glad Cade Cunningham, for all his fantasy basketball friends, had a really nice week by comparison to other weeks. 23 points, 4.7 rebounds, 8 assists, 1.7 steals on 3.3 turnovers, 47% from the field and deep, nearly 90% from the line. They lost all 3 games, lost to the Lakers 133-107, lost to the Knicks 118-112, lost to Cleveland 110-101. When you look at what they've got, what the potential is, where they could be, they may be the worst team to ever step foot on the floor. That's how bad Detroit are right now. Haven't won a game since October. No win November. Defeated December certainly coming up. They absolutely suck. There's not much more to say about how bad Detroit are. Over to the Pacers. They were 2-1 on the week. They're starting to really make a move. Season, they're 8-11. And Obi Toppin with a really nice week. Now, again, he's a guy that played all 3 games. He was the best player in those 3 games. 19.7 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 0.3 steals, and 2.3 blocks. Now, it doesn't seem like much, but less than 1 turnover a game, making 2/3 of his shots from the field, over 50% from deep, and as a reasonably athletic big, 7 out of 10 from the free throw line. Lost to the Heat in an absolute score-running game, 142-132. Certainly got the job done against the Heat, 144-129, and put more points on the board against Boston, 122-112. So their slowest week was 122 points. There are teams consistently winning 122 points this week. They lost with 132 on the board, smacked Miami in a return with 144. But the question is, who's going to be the true second option outside of Halliburton? He had a massive game against Boston, broke out. That was his first national TV game. And don't get me wrong, he is their number 1 offensive option. No one's going to contest a guy averaging 27 and 12, 50, 40, 90 with less than 3 turnovers as your number 1 option. But you do have to have someone there in case things boil over, in case things fail to pan out. They don't have that right now. It can be Miles Turner on his night. It can be Buddy Hield on his night. It can be Mathurin on his night. It can be Toppin on his night. But it's never consistent. And it's okay for guys to step up, but if you've got a consistent first, second option going into the playoffs, they're more likely to stand up. At this stage, that's not the case. I'm loving their offense. I'm loving what they're running. I'm loving what Halliburton's doing. But there's got to be some consistency of who this true second option is going to be on this team at some point. Over to the Heat, they had another rough week, but Jamie Jacquez Jr. continuing to stake his claim as one of the leading rookies in the league. Of course, the Heat 1-2 on the week, down to 11-9 on the season, so they have come back to the pack. Bam Adebayo's injury not helping there, but Jacquez Jr., 16.3 points, 4 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.3 blocks on 1.3 turnovers. Really effective from the field, makes 1/3 of his threes, 75 out of 100, makes 3/4 of his free throws. The Heat lost to the Bucks, 131-124. They lost to the Pacers in that return game, 144-129. But just huge scoring run. That is a ridiculous 2-game span there against the Pacers where they got the win, 142-132. Just a dumb amount of offense that was being produced there. And the thing is, they need to have that defensive presence return because they are leaking points. And I know teams put points up these days, but Miami are seriously leaking points. They need to hurry up and lock in defensively. It's the only way they're going to win unless they try and get out and run. They were the slowest team in the league last year. And that is what helped them in the playoffs. Eventually they could grind teams down, get them physically worn out, and play a Miami style of basketball. But that is not going to happen in the regular season. No way. Not in the East now. Teams have taken notice of Denver. Teams have taken notice of the Warriors. And that is what they're building their mold on. We'll see. I just think they need their defensive presence back. And Bam is a huge part of that. That's obvious. He's a genuine DPOY candidate. But they need to build on that presence really, really quickly, or they are going to be trying to run up small, miniature cricket scores, racing car time, speeds on the scoreboard there, just to try and get a win. It's really not going to work. A team that is getting it done though, and it is because of their leader, and a guy who I feel has got his perfect balance right now, and that's Giannis Antetokounmpo. Milwaukee 2-1 on the week, 14-6 on the season. Giannis's week saw him have 30.3 points, 11.7 rebounds, 6.7 assists, huge defensive numbers as well. 2.3 steals, 2.3 blocks a game. I know he's nearly at 5 turnovers, but when you look at the rounded numbers, when you look at the effort on both ends of the floor, and you see the fact that he's shooting nearly 68% from the field and making 8 out of 10 free throws, I'll give you a pass. They lost to Chicago in a game they probably should have got 121-13. But they got the job done against Miami, and they got the job done against Atlanta. Scored 130 points both times. And I think right now Giannis has found the perfect balance in his basketball life. And it's all because of Damian Lillard. And that gives Dame a lot of credit. And I think Dame's an all-star this year. I think at one point Dame had been their best player, but Giannis has clearly taken that mantle. Giannis back to being a top 5 player in the league. All-NBA first-team player. All-defensive first-team player. Just continuing to run up a resume that people are still going to underappreciate. And the fact that people still don't talk about the fact the guy averaged 36 and 13 in an NBA Finals and closed out an NBA Finals series with a 50-piece. But I think right now he's found that perfect balance. He's able to run the offense. He's got guys that he know that are going to convert in Lillard, in Lopez, Middleton as well. Defensively, he's got Lopez as support. He's an absolute freak. He is the Greek freak. I just think that perfect balance he's got right now is what's making this team gel. I think they're going to make a genuine run towards the top of the East. At this point, I might just have them over Philadelphia as the second best team in the East. And I think that a Milwaukee-Boston conference finals would be epic. That's something you want to tune into. And it's because they're teams that can get it done. Philadelphia still need to prove it. Philadelphia can prove, and Embiid has a massive series. Oh my God. That'd be something for the ages, but I have to see it first. And at this point, if Milwaukee is second and Philly are third, we're going to see it in the second round. But we'll see. Giannis, I think he just has that perfect balance right now, genuinely getting it done for the Bucks. For the Knicks, they've started to really try and live up to that hype that we were talking about, but I think there's still a bit of concern around it. They went 3-0 on the week, though. I can't fault the result. 12-7 on the season. I can't fault that right now either. They're above 500. They've started to play good basketball. Their player of the week, surprisingly, I agreed with the NBA. Julius Randle, 24.7 points, 13.3 rebounds, 7.3 assists. Defensive numbers, well, they haven't really been there, but it's the effective offense that gets him going. Around that 3 turnover mark, 54.9 from the field, 31.3 from deep. He needs to make more if he's going to take them, otherwise his conversion isn't too great. 75.6 from the free throw line. Massive week for Julius Randle. For New York, they defeated Charlotte 115-91, defeated Detroit 118-112, and defeated Toronto 119-106. And that's where the question has to be asked. Is New York a team that is only going to feed on the dregs of the East and the league for their success? Now, if they've got a favourable fixture with their division, you can't help it. If they've got a favourable fixture in the conference, you can't help it. If they're 1 or 2 games, if they're 2-game series in the West against bad teams, you can't help it. But I just think New York, they're a team that at the moment is angling to get most of their success by beating teams. Yeah, you can only beat what's in front of you, but if you're only a team that's only capable of beating teams below you, and then you get absolutely looked at the polar opposite by teams in contention, then you're too far in the middle. Something's got to give here for New York. They've really got to try and work that one out. Charlotte and Detroit are not going to be playing in the postseason. And Toronto's barely at this point looking like they're going to scrape into the play-in. So they're going to need to do a lot more work if they're going to be about it. I just think at the moment their success is going to be based purely off how they do against worse teams. There's nothing wrong with getting success, but you've got to be able to deliver it at the same time when it matters. We'll see what they can do. Speaking of teams that are delivering right now, they still sit second in the East. The Orlando Magic, 2-1 on the week, 14-6 on the season. And here's a guy that I genuinely thought was player of the week in the East, and a guy who may very well start to overtake as the leader of this Magic team and actually put his hand up for it. Him and Banchero are doing it, but I think that Franz Wagner is the guy that may very well do it. 27.3 points, 6.7 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 0.7 blocks. Now, everyone's going to say, well, it's not great defensively. Okay, he averaged 1 turnover a game. He shot 55.3 from the field. He shot 58% from deep and nearly 90% from the free throw line. It's epically efficient offense. So it's going to take more for the opposition to guard him than it is for him to try and, defend what he delivers because he's efficient. Defeated Washington 139-120, then defeated them 130-125, lost out to Brooklyn. So probably a bit lapsed when they have a bit of an easier game and potentially brought down to Washington's level. But I just wonder whether Franz Wagner is actually the guy that's going to grab hold of this team. Now, that's not a shot at Banchero because I think Paolo Banchero is an All-NBA level player for his career. But Wagner's also coming out as an All-NBA level player and a guy who can really take a lead. Now, will that cause some disturbance in the locker room? I don't know, but it is something the team is going to have to be cautious of because they cannot afford to have either of these guys offside. They can't afford to have factions in the locker room. One person on Wagner's side, one person on Banchero's side. That will just totally disarm that team. It'll create a level of disharmony. This Orlando team doesn't need it right now. They're young, they're coachable, they're getting it done on both ends. But someone does have to step up at one point. I do wonder whether Franz Wagner is that guy. For Philadelphia, they are really trying to track into that top 3. 0-2 in the week didn't help them. They're 12-7 on the season. Pat Beverly, though, trying to step up in that leadership role and had a pretty good week. 18.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 7 assists, or 1.5 steals. Again, this is a guy that no one truly rates, reckons that could be out of the league just because he couldn't play next to guys who wanted the ball all the time. Well, I wouldn't say that he's had a heap of the ball right now. Still playing pretty well. Defensive numbers, he's always been a bit of a pest. The numbers don't truly reflect his effort. 1.5 turnovers, extremely good, especially when you consider 68.4 from the field as a little guy, 66.7 from deep, and 77.8 from the free throw line. Lost both their games to New Orleans and to Boston. But the real question I have here for Philadelphia isn't specific to the team. It's very specific to one player, and that's Embiid. And does his absence actually speak volumes to the point of how valuable he is? Because now he is the man. He is the number one option. Maxey has to step up. I get it. Tobias Harris, third option. I get it. But this is what Embiid wanted. He wanted the proof that he was the man. And a 0-2 week, especially when you lose out to a team only by 6 when you are the man that he's potentially going to have to face in the playoffs, I would not be whinging. I would not be whinging at all. It'll be very interesting just to see how this continues to play out, continuing to see how this goes. But I just think that this week is a genuinely good case why Joel Embiid is the MVP of this team and has a genuine case as the MVP of the league. He's had a really good season. He's having a career season. I think a week like this really does just make a couple of points, certainly in his favour. Over to the Raptors. They were 1-2 in the week, 9-11. And I do have an interesting question to pose. Of course, Scotty Barnes had a really nice week there. 23 points, 9 rebounds, 4.7 assists, good defensive numbers again, efficient splits, just that turnover a game, 47% from the field, 41.2 from deep, 85.7 from the line. Lost out to the Nets 115-103. They will not be happy with that. Defeated Phoenix, ironically, and then lost out to New York. But I want people to just sort of ask the question of who really is the problem right now in Toronto. And what is the problem in Toronto? Nick Nurse has always been able to coach. No one's questioned Nick Nurse as a coach. But this is essentially the same side he couldn't get anything out of last year. People asked the question of Fred VanVleet, whether he was a selfish individual, a small guy who liked taking shots. Now he goes over to Houston, they're in a far better situation, and he's a big reason for it. So what is the real issue at hand here with Toronto? Are they a team that just simply copped it too much after COVID and having a split? Are they a team that just really relied that much on Kawhi? Are they a team that's now trying to build too young too early? Are they a bunch of guys who just are complacent? Or maybe there's more to the story about their number one option. and his personality and the effect it has on the team. There's one common denominator in all of these situations as to why Toronto isn't quite over the hump. It's not Fred VanVleet, and it's not Nick Nurse. I'm sure you guys can put those pieces of the puzzle together. Finally, in the East, one of the other worst teams in the league. In fact, I'd say they're the second worst team in the league. The Wizards, 3-16 on the season, 0-2 on the week. Kyle Kuzma, their best performer. 5 turnovers a game to go with 25 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists. Lacking defensively, ineffective from 3. They lost to the Magic twice. Can they just get the ball in the hands of Gafford and Avdia? Because they're young, they're mildly impressionable, I dare say, but just get the ball in their hands. This is... The Kuzma pool experiment's over. Give it to these younger guys. You've got a big that can play D that's efficient. You've got, a wing guy there at 6'9" who can play effectively on the perimeter in Arvida. Just get it done, Washington. Just end this experiment. They're one of the 2 worst teams in the league. There's not really much more that has to be said about that one there. As we look at our top 10 of the East, right now at the end of week 6, it's Boston, it's Orlando, it's Milwaukee, and it's Philadelphia. I do think that the Bucks are going to jump up. I think the Magic at some point slip. I don't know what the Pacers do. I don't know what the Heat do. I don't know what the Cavaliers do. I think the Knicks will just barely get by based on them beating those lower teams. And I don't see the Hawks... Well, if the Hawks are the 10th seed, that probably speaks a little more about what the lower end of that conference is doing. Because they realistically should be no more than a 10th seed. The Boston team, the Celtics team right now, clearly the number 1 team in the East. Orlando will still be thereabouts. I think their young legs will catch them at some point. I think the Bucks continue to make a move, and I think the Sixers round it out. But that 4th best team in the East still has to be there somewhere. I certainly don't think it'll be the Hawks or the Nets. I think Cleveland are a chance to sneak if they want, and if the Pacers can keep themselves healthy, it's a possibility. Now over to the player of the week in the Eastern Conference, and as I mentioned, I did actually agree with the NBA there, and I did think that Julius Randle was the best player on the week. 24.7 points, 13.3 rebounds, 7.3 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.3 blocks on 3 turnovers. Effective offense there, and they were getting wins. The big issue that has always presented itself has been the leadership of this team. Particularly this season, it's almost reached boiling points between Brunson and Randle. I think it becomes a matter of who is the best player on the night as to who leads them. I don't think there's anything wrong with it because they're both 20-point-per-game guys. The only thing that concerns me is that Randle has this on and off switch, which is as unpredictable as any player in the league. When he's absolutely on and set and good to go, then there's no issues whatsoever. Here's a guy that's going to get you 25, 15, and 5. Who's going to get you effective scoring. Who's going to play like a stretch 4. On other nights, he's going to sulk, he's going to sook, and he's not going to have his own way. And that was ultimately the big reason they needed Jalen Brunson. It's the reason Brunson has been so effective. The issue is now that he's trying to drag the team down with him when he's not well, and he's trying to do the "it is my team, it has always been my team" when they're playing too well. So he needs to get that balance right. He needs to get that mix right. It's going to be an interesting time to see exactly how it continues to pan out. But for me, Julius Randle was the player of the week for the Eastern Conference. It's not something I can deny. Had a really solid game, but again, I just think the Knicks are feeding on the dregs of the Eastern Conference, and I think for Randle, he needs to try and get some consistency in his game rather than being complacent and moody when things just aren't going his way. But that's how I see the Eastern Conference through 6 weeks of the 2023-24 NBA season. And from the Eastern Conference over to the West, let's start as we normally do. Let's have a look at the Los Angeles Clippers, who, after having Kawhi as my best player last week, he's returned as my best player this week in far better form. Clippers went 2-1 on the week, 9-10 on the season. As I mentioned, landed my best player for the team. 25.7 points, 8 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 1.3 steals, and 0.7 blocks. Only the 1 turnover, epically efficient from the field. That's what you'd expect from Kawhi Leonard. They defeated Sacramento 131-117 and defeated Golden State in their return bout 113-112, but did lose in the original 120-114. And I just wonder, though, has this rotation failed this team again? Is Russell Westbrook once again the victim of circumstance? And now it's starting to fail. No one has any loins of the legs to say anything, because it's not Russell Westbrook's fault. Kawhi Leonard's just had a great week. The Clippers have had a pretty good week. Paul George is continuing to flirt with all-star status again. But there is a guy they brought in that didn't have anyone happy and ruined a lot of rotational pieces. Ruined their chemistry, in fact, I'd say. I think it's just something to pay attention to. I think their rotations have failed. I think the situation is not going to work out. I have no doubt that it won't work out. That's why the Clippers are currently sort of in no man's land compared to where they should be. I just think there's a lot of work to do there for them if they're going to have any sort of impact moving forward. To Dallas, they went 1-2 in the week, 11-8 in the season, but they're continuing to rise up around that 4th, 5th seed there in the Western Conference. The only guy that I had as the player of the week, and he played all 3 games, Derek Jones Jr., 18.3 points, 4.7 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 0.3 blocks, efficient scoring splits, less than 2 turnovers from the field. They did defeat the Rockets in a intrastate rivalry game. They did lose to Memphis. That's something they really should be ashamed of. And lost to Oklahoma City. Just want to know what their true ranking is in their conference, though. As I said, I don't think they're a real true contender. They're not going to bother you, so to speak, for a championship run. They might have a lucky run to a conference final. They might do, similarly in Atlanta, similarly a Heat. There's always one team that seems to make a run that wasn't expected in a postseason. But I just don't know. I don't really see them as being a genuine, they're not better, I don't think, on their day than Phoenix. They're not better than Denver. They're not better than Minnesota. I just don't really see what, the fascination is with them. It'll be really interesting to see where they find out what their true ranking is in the conference. I don't think they're more than a 6th seed at best. I think they're a first-round team, and they're starting to find that out. They're having a bit of success right now, but I just don't think it's going to be any more permanent than that. Over to Denver, they're continuing to show why they are the reigning champion. And, of course, the guy that's on screen is continuing to show why he's a former MVP and why he's an absolute freak. 2-1 on the week. 14-7 on the season. Look at the numbers here on the week for Jokic. I rounded 39-15. Passable defensive numbers. Efficient ball in hand. Efficient scoring. Not much else they need. I mean, they defeated the Rockets as they should have by 10. Defeated Phoenix by 8. Lost to Sacramento, which isn't ideal, but that's an interesting matchup in itself. Could be a playoff matchup. But I just wonder if their record could be their only playoff concern. Because number 1 seed gets the U home court at every possibility. They're a good road team. They're not a great road team. They have a very good home court advantage. But if they are not a top 3 seed, if they are not even the 2nd seed, I don't know how Denver go. It's a long way to fight when you don't have, if they're a top 2 seed, they're going to get at least 2 rounds with home court advantage in the postseason. Maybe 3, depending on what happens with the number 1 seed. But I just think their playoff record would be their only concern in a postseason run. I think it's something for them to genuinely think about. Over to Golden State. It's crazy to think their record doesn't really reflect it. They're 1-2 on the week. They're 9-11 on the season. Steph was their best player. Of course he was their best player. He's their only decent player at the moment. 25.7 points, 7 rebounds, 8.3 assists, 0.3 steals, 0.7 blocks, 3 turnovers, inefficient scoring. He's getting injured. He's getting sore. He's getting old. As Charles Barkley said, he is not the Steph Curry prior. Pace is a factor. 3-point shooting is a factor. They lost to Sacramento. They lost to the Clippers in their return game, won the first. But it's crazy to think that realistically this team, whilst having the same record as Atlanta, is performing worse than Atlanta. And maybe it just speaks volumes of why people, many people think the East is the stronger conference now. Maybe that's reflected when you look at Golden State. What does Golden State look like in the Eastern Conference? Are they 9-11? I think it's a valid conversation that needs to be had. Because right now they're performing well below what their record is suggesting. They're trying their damnedest, but they're not it. They're going to need to get above 500 if they're even going to consider the play-in, I feel, at this point. But, again, Steph's their only hope. I mean, when they're winning games, he's their best player. But it wouldn't be hard because no one else is really stepping up. I just don't know how they are performing worse than the Hawks. I really don't. Because they've got better savvy veterans around their team. But somehow they're worse than Atlanta. Houston, 0-3 on the week. A bit of a bubble burst there. 8-9 on the season. They were 8-6, now they're 8-9. Şengün with another good week. Our friend Şengün, 24.7 points, 9.7 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal and a block. Needs to pick up his efficiency there with those numbers. They lost all three, as I mentioned, Dallas, Denver, and the Lakers. Just wonder if that bubble's burst. I mean, you have to concede at some point that there is going to be a bit of a run by a team you're not expecting. Utah was it last year. Houston, a little bit of that this year. Has that bubble finally burst for them? I don't know. There's a chance it very well could have. Now, the downside is the fact that they're still growing, but they have the upside is there's plenty of room to grow. Utah just feel at the moment they're a little stagnant. They don't have anyone that's truly shooting through as their number one. In fact, you'd say who their best shooting star as number one is a defensive player, and that's Kessler. But for Houston, it's maintaining. If that bubble's burst, you can't have it spread out too far. You need to contain it. It's okay to not be a 500 team when you're a growing side. It's, if you're a growing side at 500, that's awesome too. But you can't suddenly go from, having a really competitive game against Dallas, trying to hold your own against Denver, and then failing to score 100 points against the Lakers, whose only decent defender may be the defensive player of the year, but he's the only guy putting in any effort. So for Houston, they need to be able to manage if that bubble has finally burst. It'll be really keen to see what goes on there. For the Lakers, they were 2-1 on the week, 12-9 on the season, and Anthony Davis just continuing to be Anthony Davis, rounded 29-15 with 3 blocks. 28.7 points, 14.7 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 2.7 blocks, as I mentioned. 0.3 turnovers, that's epically efficient. 0.3 turnovers. He turned the ball over once. Lost to OKC, and that's probably a good barometer for them. Defeated Detroit as they should have and got rid of Houston. Can they keep the pace up, though, the Lakers? Can they track towards being a team that's potentially 10, 12, 14, maybe even 16 games above 500? I don't know. That's a pretty big ask. To go from 41-41 to 49-33, I don't know if that's a season they can have. Don't think they break 50. But really, that's the pace they could be on, 49-33. Like, that's a 16-game difference. I just don't know. There's got to be an injury bubble somewhere. The Lakers are playing okay basketball. I don't think they're going to be any threat to a championship. They're playing okay basketball. They're going to make a whole lot of teams accountable out there in the West right now, I can assure you of that. But can they keep up a pace that sees them at 49-33? I mean, that's going to be a top 3 team in the West, you would assume. I don't know. I don't see it. It'll be interesting to see what happens. What was interesting was the week from Memphis, who got 2 on the board and increased their win tally from 3 to 5, so we almost increased their wins by 50%. Well, realistically, they got 40% of their season wins this week gone alone. Desmond Bain continuing just to be Desmond Bain. Getting numbers, 24.7 points, 4.7 rebounds, 6.3 assists, 2 steals and a block, 3 turnovers. There's a guy with a lot of possessions. 51.9 from the field, 43.5 from deep, and 72.7 from the free throw line. As I mentioned, Dallas would be disappointed that they lost to them, and not only lost to them, didn't score 100 points. Utah, well, they got the win over the Jazz, lost out to the Phoenix Suns, but are they trying to just turn a corner before Ja arrives? Because you would have to think that at that 25-game mark, Ja is still 5 games away. You're going to have to take 2 weeks of conditioning, surely. Now, if he comes back after 2 weeks of conditioning, that's 50 games for him to do a bit of work. I'm not saying they're going to go 40-10. They might go 35-15. It's something to work with. If they're going 35-15 through 50 games, There's already 5 on the board. That's 40. They may very well scrape towards the play-in if they're able to do that with Ja. I don't know. I wonder if they're just turning the corner at the right time for me, Memphis. You never know. They might lose 5 of their next 6 or 6 of their next 7, and we're not even worried about it. But if you could realistically see that team going 35 and 15 in 50 games, they've already got 5 on the board. That's 40. Maybe it's more realistic than we first thought. Memphis is going to be a really interesting team. I tell you what is interesting though, and that's right now the best team in the NBA. The Minnesota Timberwolves, 3-0 on the week, 15-4 on the season, and a guy who's been criticised for his time in Utah, was the start of the reason that the season shut down in 2020. Ridiculed when he got there, didn't know how long the Minnesota experiment was going to work. I think plenty of people really looked at it and wondered what was going to happen. And now all of a sudden, here's a guy who, for the best part of a week, was the team's best player, and the team's the best team in the league. Rudy Gobert, 19.3 points, 13.7 rebounds, 3.3 blocks, 0.3 steals, less than a turnover a game, making 2/3 of his shots from the field. Granted, it's dunker spot give-offs. 73.7 from the free throw line, so he's converting when he gets there. They took down the Thunder in a tight game. Really good level there. Defeated Utah. That'd be a feather in the cap, particularly for Gobert. Defeated the Hornets as expected. But they very well may be the most balanced team in the Western Conference. Your number one offensive threat on the perimeter is arguably the most informed shooting guard in the league, not named Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Your power forward all of a sudden has really found a groove as the second to third best player on your team. He's a stretch 4 that can get inside. But there's no need to get inside when this guy is your inside presence, and he's shooting at 67% from the field, close to 20 a game. They're your 3 best players. That's the leadership they're delivering. And then you've got role players who are stepping up and getting it done. I just think they're the most balanced team in the West, and if you're going to be a balanced competitive team like Minnesota are right now, you're going to get results. And they're seeing some pretty good results right now. They're the best team in the league. We've one of the best players in the league. We've one of the leading Defensive Player of the Year candidates on a well-rounded squad. Marketing doesn't like this idea, but we could see Minnesota make an extremely deep playoff run this year if they can get it and keep it together. Just some food for thought. Over to New Orleans. Now, there were only 3 teams on the week that won 3 games. New Orleans was the third of them. 12-10 on the season, so they broke above 500. You feel that this guy on screen is starting to really get into it after he did come out in that presser a couple of weeks ago. I thought there was going to be a lot more to it. There certainly wasn't. But it's just so great to see him getting involved as well. Zion Williamson, 20.5 points, 5.8 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 1.8 steals, and 0.3 blocks a game. 3 turnovers isn't ideal, but you've got a guy who is running the floor at 6'6", like a power forward, 68.2 from the field, 84.6 from the free throw line. Get out of the man's way. Of course, New Orleans with the win against Philadelphia, 124-112, defeated the Spurs as expected, got the win against Sacramento, 127-117, the loss to Chicago, a bit of fatigue. But if Ingram and Zion can just continue to coexist, here's a team that's going to make some noise in the West. They could sneak into the 6th. I think that's their capabilities. Because you're not going to try and guard Zion one-on-one when he's running the floor. Brandon Ingram can score. CJ McCollum is going to come back into this team. And yes, he's going to take some shots, and I genuinely think that's the only concern right now with New Orleans, is how many shots will he take? How much possession will he remove from their 2 stars, and what will be the chemistry impact on that? But Zion's going to run the floor at 25 a game on 65% scoring. Good luck. You got 25, 5 and 5 guys, and CJ's going to give you another 20. Not going to whinge about that. Not going to whinge about that at all. If they, as a leadership duo, can coexist when CJ McCollum comes back, they might make a bit of noise, New Orleans. Not going to do any major damage, but I think they'll make some noise. I think they'll have an impact. Speaking of making impact, this guy right here on screen, just continuing to get it done. It's ridiculous. And no one's paying him any respect and not paying his team any respect. That's the Oklahoma City Thunder. 2-1 on the week, 13-6. They did lose to Minnesota, but guess what? The second best team, arguably in the conference, lost to arguably the best team in the league. Not a bad barometer to where you're at. Shea had a quiet week on the scoring front, really. 27.3 points compared to his usuals. But 3.7 rebounds, 6.7 assists, 3 steals and 1 block a game with less than 2 turnovers, 56% from the field, nearly 38% from deep and 95% from the line. He's the best shooting guard in the league. He's probably the best perimeter player in the league. Has a case as the MVP of the league. As I mentioned, lost to Minnesota by 3 points. Got rid of the Lakers, got rid of Dallas. And no one respects Shea and no one respects the Thunder. The only conversations that are being had this year about the Thunder are about the alleged misdemeanor of Josh Giddey off the floor and the Rookie of the Year performance that is being delivered on the floor by Chet. But no one's talking about the fact that they've probably got the MVP of the league, the fact that they're not clearly hunting as a team towards the draft. They're tracking nicely to be a playoff team. They're tracking nicely to be a top 3 team, and no one could give a damn. Yes, you do have to factor in previous success in the postseason when giving a whole body analysis on it. I get it, I understand it, I think everyone appreciates it. But you do base your regular season this year based on what has happened in the regular season this season. And I just think there needs to be a level of respect given to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I particularly think there needs to be a level of respect given to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, considering I think he may be the MVP so far this season. It won't happen, but it should. People need to take care of and take notice when talking about OKC. Over to Phoenix, 1-2 in the week, 12-8 on the season. And here's a guy that is in the media as well. It's funny, they talk about him in success and don't really give him too much because it's expected. They talk about their failures and just assume that it's his fault. I think the reason that they're successful is a guy that was copying all the blame and another guy was there. But Kevin Durant had a nice week again. 29 points, 3.3 rebounds, 7.3 assists, 1 steal, 1.3 blocks, less than 2 turnovers. Efficiency dipped compared to other weeks. 42% from the field, 35.7 from deep. And that's actually that's still good from deep. 92.3 from the free throw line. They lost to Toronto, which is where the real criticism comes in. They defeated Memphis, as they should have. Lost to Denver, as probably expected. Should have been a 2-1 week. But I just don't get how all of a sudden Kevin Durant is having historical numbers for his year, which won't get talked about because other guys have done it previously. We wouldn't want to overshadow someone that may be in their 17th or 18th season having a potentially better statistical and efficient year than someone else who was doing it on a more genuine contending team as more of a leader. We wouldn't want to do that. Now, I do think that the success of this team is predicated, and I don't think anyone will debate it, it is genuinely more predicated on the success of Devin Booker. But you can't deny the fact that Kevin Durant has been huge for this team, that he's been epically efficient on essentially a rounded 32-6 and 6 50-50-90 season. But don't turn around and just continually, because he's having a good season, try and dump on Kevin Durant. Here's a guy that was touted as being probably the greatest scorer the league would ever see, all-time points range, until he broke his foot and did an Achilles. Now he's just cracked the all-time top 10, and he's still one of the most efficient scorers the league has ever seen. One of the best regular season scorers the league has ever seen. So I wouldn't be necessarily sitting there and dishing all this negative credit to KD just because he had an off week and just because you need a headline. Really look at what this dude's doing. Over to Portland. It's really weird to say because I think Portland's having a far worse year, but they are just as good as the Bulls. 1-1 on the week, 6-13 on the season. Shaedon Sharpe, really nice production from him. 27, 8 and 5. Really nice stuff. 27 points, 7.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 1.5 steals. Less than 3 turnovers a game. Really efficient scoring splits. He's not even going to be the talking point here. I think the talking point needs to be Scoot Henderson going to be able to adapt as a rookie to the NBA. Because Scoot Henderson, I don't care about his size. I don't care about his potential. You don't get drafted necessarily on potential at times. Portland didn't draft him, hoping that eventually he would develop. They drafted him going, we're giving you the keys to the car. We're going to play you with DeAndre Ayton. We're going to give you some Malcolm Brogdon experience. We're going to let you learn under Anthony Simons. Guys of that ilk. And I get that might be the stage of his career where his development's at, and that's fair enough because he can grow to be that player. But it's the prime example of why guys in college shouldn't just be one and done because of where they can be. I get that money has a massive factor in that. If you're a rookie that's going to come onto a deal that potentially by the time extensions occur, just in your first contract, you're going to get $40 million, then you might turn around off your rookie deal and all of a sudden you're looking at $250 million. Yeah, that's generational wealth. Generational wealth. That's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 generations of a family that would never have to work a day in their life. But if you're not good enough to play the game, you're not going to see that level of generational wealth. And I just wonder whether Scoot's going to adapt as a rookie, whether he's going to get anywhere as a rookie. Because it's all well and good to be in the league, but you've also got to have the ability to do it. And right now, he doesn't. Simple as that. Sacramento went 2-2 on the week. They're a team, one of the few teams that played 4 games. They're 11-8 on the season. Their best performer was De'Aaron Fox, 31.3 points, 5.8 rebounds, 7.5 assists. He actually won the NBA's Western Conference Player of the Week. 1.5 steals, 0.5 blocks, 3.3 turnovers, 47.8 from the field, 31% from deep, 68.2 from the free throw line. Really interesting week. They lost to Golden State by a point, a team that I thought they'd probably have. Sorry, they defeated them by a point, I should say. And that was one result. Then all of a sudden, as you see, they get that by a point. I thought they should have got that by more of a point. That's what I was meant to say. They lose to the Clippers. They probably should have beat the Clippers. They defeat Denver. Okay, I would have expected probably a loss to Denver. Then they lose to New Orleans. It's a week that probably should have been 3-1. But I think right now their lack of defense is just becoming evident. Because they're getting beat by teams that shouldn't beat them. And all of a sudden the possession's gone out of a certain big man's hands and the team's not as good. I just think when you don't have the effective offensive possession from certain players who should be running your offense, who are dishing the shots up, that is when your defense becomes more evident. Because if you're a very highly effective and highly efficient offensive unit, it doesn't matter. Indiana somehow is proving that. Denver proved that. But if you are just going to give it to guys who are going to try and get possessions, who are trying to get numbers, then the defense just does become that huge issue. And right now, Sacramento don't have it. And there's already talk about a certain person in this particular slide not being there soon. And then you have to start the rebuild once again. But I just think you get the ball in the right hands of the right players. Yep, you do sacrifice your defense a lot. But if you're going to be effective offensively, you can make up for it. But that's just something right now that they're not able to do. Continuing through, we've only got 2 teams to go. One of them being San Antonio, so this will be brief. 0-2 in the week. They're 3-16 on the season. They need to try and focus on Wemby because this bloke right now is not the guy. Praise be his efficient week. 23 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5 assists. 3.5 turnovers, okay, but it's effective. Almost 60% from the field, 70% from deep, 90% from the free throw line. They lost to Atlanta and New Orleans. They don't have any veterans, and you've got one of the guys that have come down the pike that's been compared to Russell, Kareem, Wilt, LeBron. That's an extreme level of recruit in comparison, an all-time level. And they're not using him at all. Just focus on Wemby. Get some veterans in to nurture some of the... don't get me wrong, I think Sohan can be helpful. I think Vassell can be helpful. I think Pirtle can be helpful. But you need to get some veterans around these guys to help mould them. If you get a quality role-playing veteran for each of these guys, this team is exponentially better. Exponentially better. But they're not going to do it. I don't know why. They would improve so much more if they did it, San Antonio. Finally, over to the Jazz, 1-2 on the week, 7-13 on the season. Somehow a team that is playing relatively the same as Portland and the Bulls. And they feel like a team that could be a lot worse. I think they're above their record personally. Sexton, their best player of the week, 16 points, 2.7 rebounds, 4 assists. And again, the question now remains, 0.3 steals, 2.7 turnovers, efficient scoring splits. They lost to Memphis. That's a real good indicator of where they're sitting right now. Lost to Minnesota as expected. They got the win on Portland. They both sit around the same sort of egg basket. But can they win against anything besides bottom-feeding teams? Because if they can't, don't worry about it. We're not talking peripheral 500 teams like New York. We're talking Detroit, Washington, San Antonio, and at this point, Memphis is all they're really going to compete against. If they're not going to do anything else against anyone, what are we worried about? What are we doing? The Jazz had so much upside. Kessler being injured, a concern. They don't have any defense. I don't think the athletic gamble on Collins has worked. He's crowding Markkanen. You've got Sexton and Clarkson who can work as a duo, but they need to work in a better defensive team. Just, they're not winning against anything but bottom sides. But Danny Ainge must have a plan, but I don't know what that plan is. And I think a lot of people want to see it come to fruition sooner rather than later, because this is just a drizzler at the moment, Utah. They're going to have to be careful. Top 10 teams in the West, the Timberwolves, the Thunder, the Nuggets, and the Suns. I still think that is where most of this season is going to look. The Mavericks, the Kings, the Lakers, maybe. And then I think the Peter out there with the Pelicans, the Clippers, and the Rockets is about right. You might see Golden State do a lift here or there. You might see Memphis make a run when Ja returns. Other than that, I think your top 4 is roughly set in the West. I think that you'll have the Lakers and the Mavs making some noise. As I said, I think the Pelicans can do a bit of damage. I think the Kings can steady. You never know. The Clippers might get it together. I think the Rockets will be the real victim. Outside of that, it's Golden State. It might be Memphis who make a run. I don't think we see much else than that, though. And finally, to end, my Western Conference Player of the Week, a guy very much maligned, as mentioned, but a guy who has come down the pike, a guy who has improvised, adapted, and overcome the odds. To go from a guy that was looking like he was going to be bounced around the league to a guy who looks like he's going to be a Defensive Player of the Year again. Rudy Gobert, my Player of the Week. Best player for a team that won 3 games was him or Zion, and he was far better than Zion. I think you've got to impact both ends of the floor and just how crucial his rebounding is and his defense. 19.3 points, 66.7 from the field. Rudy Gobert really is just proving how dominant defensive centers can be. And he's much more effective in FIBA because he's allowed to camp in the paint. So for everyone who wants to bring back those camp in the paint rules, Rudy Gobert would be a far better player. Especially when you consider now offensively with the way they spread the floor. Imagine offensively, you spread the floor and you leave Gobert down to defend one-on-one. There aren't many great dominant bigs inside. He's efficient offensively because he can score from a dunker spot. You've got to cover a drive on a lot of these guys. He'd be a better player. A far better player. I don't know anyone that's going to debate that either. Rudy Gobert, my Player of the Week in the West for Week 6. That's been my review for Week 6, guys. A lot going on in the league. Some real movers and shakers. Some real movers and shakers. It's starting to get interesting towards Christmas, that's for sure. Anyway, guys, that's been me. I'm out.